My name is Leah Cole. At the age of 7, when I was most unpopular, I had been sent back to the Madison Children's Home in Wisconsin for the third time by an adoptive family. Mrs. Hanson, the director, always looked at me with a mix of helplessness and regret. I couldn't help it. I was born with a contrarian personality and a sharp tongue that cut like a poisoned knife. Anyone who crossed me would immediately start questioning their life choices. On this day, the door of the children's home swung open. A well-dressed couple walked in, holding a little boy by the hand. The man wore a tailored suit and exuded an air of authority, clearly a prominent figure in the local business community. The woman was dressed in an elegant silk dress, gentle and beautiful. Only the little boy, chin held high, had a look of arrogance far beyond his years, obviously a spoiled young master. Suddenly, rows of translucent text popped up in front of my eyes, just like the bullet comments in the videos on Mrs. Hanson's tablet. Here they come. The villainous young master, Caden Walker. Spoiled rotten by his grandparents since childhood, he'll ruin anyone who dares to contradict him in no time. His parents can't control him anymore, so they want to adopt an obedient child to subtly influence him. Too bad, obedient isn't a word that applies to the female lead at all. There's the female lead, scared half to tears, the little girl with straight bangs. What a shame the villain's parents are blind, they're probably going to miss her. Bored, I yawned, thinking that obedient children had nothing to do with me. I might as well go back to squatting in the corner with my book. That way, I wouldn't get picked again only to be sent back later. Mommy, look at that yawning little girl, she's so fat. An arrogant yet childish voice suddenly rang out. It was Caden, the villainous young master. I frowned instinctively, and a retort escaped my lips before I could think. Fat? Are your eyes glued shut with sleep crust? Caden froze, staring at me in a daze for a full 10 seconds. The entire children's home fell so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The other kids were too scared to breathe, and even Mrs. Hanson squeezed her hands nervously. The next second, Caden burst into tears, his face covered in snot and tears, yet he still managed to snarl threats. Mommy. She dared to talk back to me. I'm going to ruin her family. The bullet comments exploded again. Ha ha ha, first time seeing the villain get shut down. This little girl is a total badass, she's doomed. The villain holds a grudge, he'll definitely get revenge later. Don't worry, she doesn't fit the adoption criteria. The villain's family wants someone obedient. She'll never make it out of the children's home. I breathed a sigh of relief too. Honestly, with my personality, what family could put up with me? No matter how bad Caden was, he had nothing to do with me. Caden's mother apologized profusely to Mrs. Hanson. The grandparents have spoiled this child rotten. Please forgive him. Mrs. Hanson quickly waved it off. Not at all. Leah is just born this way. Please don't take it to heart. I straightened my back, looked at the still crying Caden, and said earnestly, you can't ruin my family. I don't even have one. Caden's crying stopped abruptly. He hiccuped, his little face turning bright red with anger and urgency. That's impossible. Don't you have a mommy and daddy? Is that a tumor on your neck? I tilted my head, looking at him in confusion. Don't you even know where you are right now? This is a children's home. Caden was left tongue-tied, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. His face turned crimson with frustration. Finally, he threw himself into his mother's arms, pounding her legs as he cried, Mommy. She's bullying me. Make her go away. A look of exhaustion crossed Mrs. Walker's face. Mrs. Hanson hurried over to take my hand, her tone stern. Leah, go apologize to your brother. We're going inside. Mrs. Hanson had always been kind to me. She never blamed me, even after I was sent back multiple times. I didn't want to make things hard for her, so I reluctantly walked over to Caden. I'm sorry, brother, I mumbled unwillingly. But as soon as the words left my mouth, my innate contrarian instincts kicked in. I couldn't help but add, but which part of what I said hurt you? Tell me, I want to say it again. Caden's eyes widened in shock. A wronged expression quickly spread across his face. He buried his head and started crying louder than ever. Mrs. Hanson shot me a, "What am I going to do with you?" look and was about to pull me away when Mr. Walker, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly stopped us. "Your name is Leah, right?" He squatted down in front of me, smiling gently. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Would you like to come live with us?" I was about to refuse when the bullet comments suddenly changed. Wait a minute. This isn't the plot. Why have they taken a fancy to this little girl? The female lead is still over there. The villain's family has $1 billion trust fund that he can claim when he turns 18, but only if he lives that long. Is this little girl choosing money over her life? $1 billion? My eyes lit up instantly. I grabbed Mr. Walker's hand and nodded vigorously, "Yes. Daddy, I'd love to." "Shut up. He's my daddy," Caden shouted, pointing at me. I swallowed the retort that was on the tip of my tongue. After all, whoever was going to give me $1 billion was basically my real father. Mr. Walker saw my restrained look and smiled, encouraging me, "Leah, we're adopting you because we want you to be unapologetically yourself." So their plan was to fight fire with fire, using me to keep this little villain in line. That was easy. I immediately straightened up and said to Caden seriously, "Brother, now that Daddy's adopted me, he's my daddy too." Caden plopped down on the floor, rolling around and crying, "I don't care. I don't want her in my house." Mr. and Mrs. Walker exchanged a look, then said firmly to Mrs. Hanson, "Mrs. Hanson, we've made up our minds. We're adopting her." Mrs. Hanson tried to persuade them to think it over, but Mr. Walker waved her off. "It's settled. We want to try an unconventional approach." And just like that, I got into the car that would take me away from the children's home. Fearing Caden and I would fight in the car, Mrs. Walker had arranged for me to ride with her in a separate vehicle. On the way, I learned that Caden was 6 years old, only a few months older than me. He was like a little emperor at home. If a maid ever displeased him, he'd throw a tantrum until she was fired. The car drove into an upscale estate community in the suburbs of Madison, surrounded by lush green trees and gurgling streams. Finally, it stopped in front of an imposing European-style villa. I followed Mrs. Walker inside and was completely stunned. The house was bigger than the entire children's home. The crystal chandelier in the living room sparkled brightly, like something out of a fairy tale castle. Caden had arrived before us. When he saw me, he snorted, turned his head haughtily, and shouted at the butler, "I want to ride a horse." I was just wondering if the family kept horses when I saw the tall butler drop to his knees with a thud and said respectfully, "Young master, please mount." Caden climbed triumphantly onto the butler's back and shouted, "Giddy up. Run faster." Mrs. Walker's face darkened instantly. She struggled to contain her anger and said, "Caden, stop fooling around. I don't care. I want to play." Caden yelled. The butler quickly tried to smooth things over. "It's all right, madam. The young master is just a child, he likes to play." As Caden rode past me on the butler's back, he sneered condescendingly, "Country bumpkin, you've never ridden a horse before, have you?" I curled my lips and shot back immediately, "It doesn't look that fun. The last time I saw someone riding like this was in a history documentary. Most of those nobles who rode on slaves ended up dying a terrible death." Caden lost his balance and scrambled off the butler's back in a panic, his little face turning bright red with anger. "You dare curse me to death?" I shook my head earnestly. "I didn't, brother. I'm just teaching you some basic knowledge. It's okay to have an empty head, you can fill it up. The problem is having a head full of water. Why don't you shake it and see if you can hear the Mississippi River?" The butler gasped and closed his eyes, as if bracing for a storm. But Caden was left dumbfounded by my logic, unable to say a word for a long time. Finally, he ran over to Mrs. Walker and threw a tantrum on the floor. "Mommy! Send her back. She's bullying me." Mrs. Walker ignored him completely. Instead, she took my hand gently and said, "Leah, why don't you play in the living room for a while? I'll go change and then show you around the house." It was the first time an adult had never criticized me for being sharp-tongued. I was so touched I almost cried. I nodded obediently. "Go ahead, Mommy. I'll wait for you." Caden was completely stunned. He had never seen his mother treat anyone like this before. After Mrs. Walker left, he stared at me and said sarcastically, "Humph, country bumpkin. You've never seen a house this big, have you?" "It's okay," I said, running my hand over an antique vase in the living room. "I have just enough clay in my hands to bury you with." "You!" Caden was so angry his face turned red. "Are you this arrogant because you have Mommy and Daddy backing you up now?" "No, I was born this way." I turned to look at him. "But you, are you this arrogant because the Animal Protection Association is protecting you?" Caden stared at me blankly for 2 seconds before he realized what I meant. He pointed at me, his fingers trembling. "You're such a mean girl. No boy will ever want you when you grow up." I curled my lips and replied calmly, "That's not necessarily true. But someone as great as you, brother, when you grow up, I'm sure plenty of men will be fighting over you." Caden stared at me in dumbfounded silence, completely lost for words. Chapter 2, Chaos in the Walker Household. At dinner, my adoptive father had to leave suddenly for an emergency. Only Mrs. Walker, Caden, the butler Josh, and I were at the table. Josh filled my plate to the brim with food and said with a smile, "Miss Leah, just tell me what you like, and I'll make it for you from now on." I had never seen such exquisite food before. I dug in, not forgetting to thank Josh. "Thank you, brother Josh." To my surprise, Josh wiped the corner of his eye and muttered excitedly, "She actually said thank you. What a good girl." As I chewed, I thought to myself, how rude must Caden be if a simple "thank you" moved Josh this much? Caden, sitting across from me, seemed to be provoked by my gratitude. He took a bite of food and tried to mimic me. "The dinner is delicious tonight." "Thank you, brother Josh." Josh froze on the spot. It wasn't until Mrs. Walker smiled and told him to sit down that he snapped out of it, pulling out a chair and sitting down stiffly. But Caden's politeness didn't last long. Watching me eat heartily, he snorted, "Country bumpkin, eat less. Look how fat you are." I didn't even look up, my mouth stuffed full. "Fat? I just have a good metabolism." "You should eat less salt, brother, you look like you've had too much." Caden was shut down again. He stared at me with wide eyes, seemingly confused by how I always had a comeback for everything. Unwilling to admit defeat, he attacked again, "You're fat and dark. You don't look like a girl at all." I finally looked up, sitting up straight and proper. "How don't I look like a girl? I just don't have your shallow taste, brother." Seeing Caden frown in confusion, I kindly picked up a piece of salmon and put it on his plate. "Eat more fish, brother, it's good for your brain. Though with the gap between us, you might need to eat a whole whale to catch up." Caden stared at me blankly, completely defeated. He almost dropped his chopsticks on the floor. Mrs. Walker kept her head down, her shoulders trembling slightly. I glanced over and realized she was secretly laughing. Ever since I came to the Walker household, life had been nothing but chaos. Caden seemed determined to compete with me, finding new ways to annoy me every day, only to be left tongue-tied by my retorts each time. Over time, his arrogant and overbearing attitude actually mellowed quite a bit. He still didn't look at me kindly, but at least he stopped throwing tantrums at the servants for no reason. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. I had grown into an elegant young lady, the only thing that hadn't changed was my sharp tongue. Caden had also grown into a tall, straight young man over 6 feet tall, with handsome features. He was the most popular guy at Madison Private High School, surrounded by girls wherever he went. But he still didn't treat me well. He never called me his sister or even by my name, always addressing me with a dismissive, "Hey." We went to the same high school and the same class. He even sat right in front of me. Yet at school, we barely spoke, as if we were strangers. On the first day of the second semester of 10th grade, I put on some tinted moisturizer that Mrs. Walker had given me. After all, at 16, who didn't want to look nice? I hadn't expected to bump right into Caden as soon as I walked downstairs. He curled his lips in disdain and said sarcastically, genuinely curious, "Did you put on makeup to cover up how ugly you are?" After living with me for so long, this guy had definitely picked up my skill for sarcasm. I flipped my hair and smiled, firing back, "No. Did you put on pants to cover up your shortcomings?" Caden's eyebrows furrowed almost imperceptibly. He wasn't as easy to provoke as he had been when we were kids. He narrowed his eyes and said through gritted teeth, "Take off that makeup. You could go trick-or-treating for Halloween right now." I put on my shoes and shot back, "Halloween is boring. Why don't you take off your pants? You could celebrate Children's Day instead." With that, I walked out the door without looking back. Brother Josh was already waiting for us in the car. Caden followed behind me, fuming with rage but powerless to do anything. "Leah Cole, can't I say a few words to you?" "No, you can't." "And I never said you could," I replied casually. He suddenly fell silent. I turned around and saw him standing there, his face bright red, stammering, "Don't talk nonsense like that, as if you know anything about it." "I don't know anything about it," I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not interested in scrawny guys anyway." Caden looked at me as if he wanted to kill me, but I got into the car in a great mood. In all honesty, he had a great figure, broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Occasionally, when I saw him playing basketball shirtless at home, his muscle definition was quite impressive. But I had to keep him in line, I couldn't let him get too complacent. When we got to class, I walked straight to the seat in the last row. There were only 2 empty seats left in the whole class, both of which Caden had reserved, through his little tricks, one for himself in the front, and one for me right behind him. I had just put down my bag when the homeroom teacher walked in, followed by 2 other students. The boy was tall and thin, with a pair of charming fox-like eyes, strikingly handsome. The girl had straight bangs and big eyes, looking quiet and well-behaved. She seemed familiar somehow. Suddenly, the bullet comments popped up in front of my eyes again, catching me off guard after so long. "Ah. Here come the male lead Ethan and the female lead Lily. Let the love triangle begin." In the original story, the male lead will take the initiative to ask the female lead to be his desk mate. The villain will disagree, and they'll almost get into a fight. I wonder if it'll happen the same way this time. Look at the female lead, she's been staring at the villain the whole time. So she liked him from the very beginning. That's when I realized, the girl was Lily, the female lead who had been trembling with fear at the children's home all those years ago. I never thought that 10 years later, we would meet again at the same school and in the same class. After Ethan and Lily introduced themselves, the homeroom teacher told them to find seats for themselves. The only empty seat left was next to me. Lily walked straight over to Caden and said with a smile, "Classmate, can I sit next to you?" Caden hesitated for a moment, then suddenly glanced back at me. I rolled my eyes at him, and he immediately turned his head away with a dark expression. Just as he was about to agree, Ethan suddenly walked over. Lily thought Ethan had come for her. She frowned, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I can't be your desk mate." Ethan paused in his tracks, looking at her strangely. "Are you okay? Who said I wanted to be your desk mate?" Lily's face turned red and then pale, overwhelmed with embarrassment. But Ethan paid her no mind. He walked straight up to me, his face breaking into a bright smile, his eyes fixed on me as if I were a precious treasure. The bullet comments exploded instantly. What's going on? The male lead isn't going for the female lead, he's going for this extra. Help. The male lead's gaze is so intense. Could he have a crush on Leah? Oh no. The plot has completely derailed. Is the female lead turning into a side character? I felt uncomfortable under his stare. I was just about to speak when he pulled out the chair and prepared to sit down. At that moment, Caden suddenly stood up, propped his hands on my desk, flipped over to the back row in one smooth motion, and plopped down next to me, claiming the seat. She's my sister. I have to take care of her, Caden panted, saying to Ethan. Go sit in the front. Ethan froze for a second, then smiled shyly. So you're my future brother-in-law. Your sister is so cute, she's exactly my type. Can you do me a favor and help us out? Caden and I were both stunned by his words. I looked at Ethan in confusion, wondering if there was something wrong with his brain. The icy demeanor Caden had worked so hard to maintain shattered instantly. He jumped up and pointed at Ethan, yelling, "What's your problem? Who's your brother-in-law?" After yelling at Ethan, he turned to me and snapped, "Leah Cole, haven't you taken a bath lately? Where did you pick up this fly?" It was the first time Caden had left me speechless. The bullet comments were already filled with laughter. Ha ha ha. Leah finally met her match. The male lead is so fake nice, it's oozing out of the screen. The villain is about to explode. I love this plot. Sundara villain versus fake nice male lead versus sharp-tongued female lead. But Ethan spoke to Caden seriously, "Brother-in-law, I know it's a bit sudden to call you that, but I'm serious about Leah. If you don't trust me, I can pursue her right in front of you, you can supervise the whole time." Caden's face turned as dark as ink. He ground his teeth and said, "You're going to pursue her? Right in front of me?" "That's right, you can supervise every step of the way," Ethan nodded firmly. Caden took a deep breath, then turned to me with a sneer. "Look at you, Leah Cole, someone's chasing you now. Did you hear that?" My usual sharpness instantly kicked in. I turned to Ethan and asked, "Why are you chasing me? Do I look like I have dog food?" But Ethan didn't take offense at all. Instead, he said excitedly, "Do you think I look like a dog? Not just a dog, I'd even give you my life if you agreed to be with me." Caden and I were left stunned again. Oh no, I'd met a tough one. I couldn't even outsnark this fake nice male lead. Chapter 3, The Out-of-Control Love Triangle. The class bell saved me. While Caden wasn't paying attention, Ethan pushed him aside, sat down in the empty seat next to me, and even grinned at Caden, saying, "Thanks, brother-in-law." Caden was furious. He growled under his breath, "Shut up. I'm not your brother." Ethan froze for a second, then leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Leah, does he have a bad temper? My mom always says men with unstable emotions are bad news." Caden heard every word clearly. He ground out, "What did you say?" Just then, the teacher walked into the classroom. Caden could only glare at Ethan angrily and returned to his seat reluctantly. Ethan huddled behind me, still adding fuel to the fire, "Leah, he's so scary." "I'm scared." I rolled my eyes and ignored him. This male lead was even more annoying than Caden had been as a kid. During class, Ethan said he hadn't brought his textbook and insisted on sharing mine. His face was so close that his warm breath brushed my cheek, carrying a faint minty scent. After all, I was just a 16-year-old girl. Staring at his handsome face so close to mine, I couldn't help but zone out. "Leah, you can't hide the look in your eyes when you like someone," Ethan suddenly whispered, chuckling softly. I snapped back to my senses, my mouth moving faster than my brain, but if you like more than one person, you definitely need to hide it. Ethan wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled and asked, "Who else do you like?" "Oh, lots of people, Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Keynes," I snorted, thinking to myself, let's see if you can keep up with these economists. To my surprise, he understood. He nodded and smiled, "You're right, I like them too." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. This kind of snark only worked on ignoramuses, like Caden. It was completely useless against a top student like Ethan. A sense of frustration washed over me, and my face turned red instantly. "Leah, your blushing face is so cute," Ethan suddenly leaned his head in front of me. I pushed his head away and said, "Watch what you say. I'm afraid I'll get diabetes." "Then I'll stop talking," he said, grinning like a cat that had caught the canary. "But I'll eat you up sooner or later." At that moment, Caden suddenly turned around. Veins were popping on his forehead, and he stared at us with a menacing look. He said sarcastically, "You two are getting along really well, huh? Should I tell Mom to start preparing your dowry early?" "No need to trouble yourself," Ethan spoke up first. "My family already has one ready, and I won't skimp on the betrothal gifts either." "Ethan, don't go too far." Caden's voice turned cold. "Brother-in-law, I'm serious about Leah," Ethan said earnestly. I looked at the two of them, their tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, and felt a headache coming on. They had completely ruined a good class. As soon as the bell rang for recess, Caden grabbed Ethan by the collar and dragged him outside. When Lily saw this, she quickly followed. I hesitated for a moment, then quietly trailed behind them, curious to see what they would do. In the corner of the school's football field, Caden pinned Ethan against the wall, his eyes fierce. "Stay away from Leah, or you'll regret it." "Brother-in-law, love can't be forced," Ethan wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Besides, Leah doesn't seem to hate me." "What do you know?" Caden's voice was filled with frustration. "She just acts tough, deep down, she's really timid. Don't bully her." I froze in place, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. Even though he was always so mean to me, this guy actually cared enough to protect me. Just then, Lily ran over and grabbed Caden's arm. "Caden, don't fight. The teacher will give you a demerit." Caden impatiently shook off her hand. "It's none of your business." Lily's face paled instantly, and her eyes reddened with tears. She looked at Caden with a wronged expression. "Brother Caden, have you forgotten? Back when we were at the children's home as kids, you promised you'd protect me." That's when I remembered, in the original story, the reason Caden had noticed Lily was because of that silly promise he'd made as a kid. But now, he'd long forgotten all about it. "I don't know you," Caden frowned, his tone cold. "Don't call me Caden anymore." Lily cried even harder. Ethan watched with amusement, then winked at me. "Leah, look how special you are to him." I ignored him, walked straight up to Caden, and patted his shoulder. "Stop fighting. Winning a fight won't put food on the table." Caden turned around. When he saw me, his gaze softened instantly. He let go of Ethan's collar and asked, "Why are you here?" "If I hadn't come, you would have gotten a demerit," I shrugged. "And then Mom would have lectured you non-stop." Caden didn't say anything. He just glared at Ethan silently, then turned and walked away. I followed behind him, and Ethan trotted along too, while Lily stood there, dejected and lost. On the way back, Caden suddenly spoke up. "Leah Cole, stay away from Ethan from now on. He's not a good person." "How do you know?" I asked curiously. "I investigated him," Caden's voice was low. "He's the illegitimate son of the Shin family. He acts harmless on the surface, but he's actually very scheming." I was shocked. I hadn't expected Caden to be so careful. I looked at his tall, straight back and suddenly smiled. Caden Walker, do you have a crush on me? Caden's steps faltered. He suddenly turned around, his face turning bright red. What are you talking about? I just don't want you to cause trouble for the family. Oh, really? I raised an eyebrow, teasing him on purpose. But you just said you'd protect me. I was just. He stammered, unable to finish his sentence. Finally, he snapped, flustered, I don't want to talk to you. With that, he strode forward quickly, but the tips of his ears were bright red, almost bleeding. The bullet comments flooded my vision. Ah. The villain definitely has a crush. It's so obvious. Sundaras are just too stubborn to admit their feelings. He must have liked the female lead for a long time. Fake nice male lead versus Sundara villain, who will the female lead choose? I'm team villain. I looked at Caden's back, a warm feeling in my heart. Over the past 10 years at the Walker house, he had long stopped being that little villain who only knew how to throw tantrums. And I had long stopped being that kid from the children's home who only cared about getting that billion-dollar trust fund. As for Ethan, he still pestered me every day, while Caden competed with him wits and wits. Lily occasionally came to find Caden, but every time, he brushed her off coldly. Days passed by. I was still the sharp-tongued Leah Cole, Caden was still the Tsundere Caden Walker, and Ethan was still the fake nice Ethan. This farce, which had started with an unexpected adoption, was still going on. Looking at the two bickering boys beside me, I suddenly thought, maybe that billion-dollar trust fund wasn't so important after all. Over the past 10 years at the Walker house, I had not only gained a family, but also a brother who, despite his sharp words, would always protect me. And I had a life filled with chaos and laughter. As for what the future held, who cared? With my sharp tongue, I could talk my way out of anything. And Caden would definitely always stand by my side, facing everything with me.